Can you all tell me what flag this is? Yeah, don't be shy, just shout it out. Easy, right? I mean, it's the country we're all in right now. What about this one? Yeah. Not quite as easy as the Czech Republic, is it? This is the Bhutanese flag. All right, I'll go back to another easy one then. Yeah, it seems like most of us got that one. And how about this one? Anyone? This is South Sudan's flag. And finally, what about these three? These three almost identical flags are the Polish, Indonesian, and Monegasque flags. Most of you struggled with some of those. But ever since I was small, I've known every single one of those. I can name any of the 195 national flags of the world, and I could also tell you their capital cities. I'm not kidding. Here, let me show you some. Andorra, Paraguay, the Central African Republic, Tonga, Kyrgyzstan, Antigua and Barbuda. I could go on and name any national flag. Ever since I was 5 or 6, I've had all this knowledge memorized. But the thing is, I never learned it. I never searched up any world flags. I never studied them. I never looked at them. And honestly, I never even thought about them. That was until I turned 6. And ever since then, I've been a huge geography nerd. And it all spawned out of that spontaneous emergence of those flags in my memory. Out of nowhere, I had access to an entirely new door to knowledge, one which wasn't there before. Or was it? You've all probably heard the saying that children soak up new things like sponges, whether that be languages or any new skills. As it turns out, the notion that children are better learners than adults is actually true. And that is because, as children, our brains have heightened plasticity, meaning they're much more flexible, and because as children, we are much more receptive to new information. As we grow older and mature, though, the brain's capacity for change decreases. With time, our brains settle into the lives that we've made for ourselves. This process of decreasing the brain's plasticity is controlled by inhibitory neurons, which regulate the creation of new connections in the brain. They decide what to rewire in the brain in response to any experience, so they essentially regulate what the brain learns. Not to bore you to death with this lecture about neuroplasticity and inhibition, but these inhibitory neurons will essentially allow most information to enter the brain when they're young. As the neurons grow older, they become much more like us, judgmental. But there is that critical period during which they will allow most information to enter the brain and create new connections. That critical period is when I must memorize the flags. I may sound a bit uncertain about this to you, and that is because, truth be told, I am. I have no idea how I know all those flags, and neither do my parents or anyone else close to me. They seem to have just appeared out of nowhere, which is why I claim to have never learned them, at least not in the traditional sense. That strange phenomenon, which is maybe so obnoxious to play against in flag memory games, has no obvious logical explanation. And with that flag game annoyance, I'm being completely serious. For my 7th or 8th Christmas, my grandmother gifted me a game named Flag Spectrum, which revolves around naming the flags of the world. The first time we played, I won, even against my parents and grandparents. The next time, I was alone while everyone else was in teams. I won again, this time by an even greater margin. As you can imagine, we haven't played it too many times since, but this game is what truly made me aware of my flag knowledge. For some reason, a 7-year-old me beating my adult parents and grandparents in a knowledge-based game didn't shock me at first. I could confidently surprise anyone who witnessed me naming the flags of the world as if those flags were ingrained inside my brain. My knowledge of flags felt so natural, so unforced, that it was as if I was born with it. But I wasn't born with that knowledge. It's not as if my memory came as a preloaded hard drive with the flags of the world stored on it. And like I already said, I never searched up New World flags when I was 5. I never tried to memorize the flags of Central America, but somehow they're in my brain now. And now, I have the special ability to point out the only 2 flags in the world which have the color purple on them, which are Nicaragua and Dominica, by the way. Based on my reading on brain development, I believe that my knowledge of flags comes from me playing with some flags in my preschool. But surely I can't have subconsciously memorized 195 flags that way. Or so I thought. Because realistically, there was no other place where I possibly could have been exposed to and memorized those flags. So even though I have no strong memories of me playing with any flags in my preschool, that is most likely where I learned them. Having settled on the origins of my flag knowledge being me playing with some flags or looking at a poster with the flags of the world in my Warsaw preschool, let's move on to the next piece of this knowledge puzzle. I have the knowledge in my brain, but how do I access it? I'd like to imagine that on my 6th birthday, I woke up and could suddenly name every single flag in the world. But life is not like a movie, and that is certainly not what happened. It was a more gradual process. At first, I would mess up on some of the similar flags, like the Polish, Indonesian, and Monegasque flags I asked you all about earlier. But relatively quickly, my brain ironed out those errors, and I could soon differentiate all the flags of the world. My access to this knowledge was still extremely sudden, though, as I had no idea I knew any flags before that one day. Of course, my learning the flags at such a young age helped, because of the heightened plasticity and inhibitory balance. But that still does not explain how I could access that knowledge. So I continued my search for an answer until I reached my memory. Now, my memory is certainly not exceptional, but it is relatively strong. I can remember many things after reading them just once. I can remember my speeches, and well, I can name any of the 195 national flags of the world. Perhaps the strength of my memory is we made that door to knowledge inside my brain accessible. But what about other doors? What about a door to the digits of pi? What about a door to chess openings? And what about the doors in your brains? We've all been children at some point, so we've all lived through that critical period. We've all had high brain plasticity and the optimal inhibitory balance, and we all played and learned things during that period. So where is that knowledge now? We might all have this knowledge in our memories and our brains. The challenge is finding a way to access it. There are almost endless possibilities for the knowledge that might be hidden inside your brains that you are yet to discover, whether that knowledge is one of flags, like mine, or art theory, or even physics concepts. So when you go home today, start searching for that potentially hidden knowledge. It could be anywhere. As I'm doing this TEDx talk in a school, I find it only fitting that I give you all a small test. Don't worry though, it's nothing too difficult. Actually, I just spoke about these 3 flags a couple minutes ago. Remember these? I'll tell you this, these are the flags of Poland, Indonesia, and Monaco. But can you tell me which is which? If you said that flag A was Monaco's, B Poland's, and C the Indonesian flag, you'd be right. If you got all 3 of those correct, you might just have that same hidden knowledge of flags that I have. And if you didn't, don't worry, your hidden knowledge may just be in another area. I'm not saying that we can all become the next chess grandmasters, and you should definitely not expect to become the next Einstein if you bang your head against the wall enough. But we might all have a layer of knowledge in our brains that we never learned. We just need to learn to tap into that knowledge.